Finance, it is all about risk and maximizing wealth and so on. Spend money, but don't waste it. Money is to serve us. We are not to serve the money.
Behavioral finance has really been the biggest innovation in finance over the past 50 years, at least I'd argue. And Meir Statman is one of the godfathers of behavioral finance, and he is credentialed as they come. He's a professor of finance at Santa Clara University. He's a member of the advisory board of the Journal of Portfolio Management, the Journal of Wealth Management, Journal of Retirement, the Journal of Investment Consulting, the Journal of Behavioral and Experimental Finance, and he's an associate editor of the Journal of Behavioral Finance and the Journal of Investment Management. In fact, I could go on and on, but in the interest of time, I've got to keep it brief. Meir was also named one of the 25 most influential people by Investment Advisor. He is also the author of A Wealth of Well-Being, which is his most recent book. And this is a book that really crosses the blood-brain barrier in the sense that it's not just about behavioral finance. It's more of a scientific look at well-being overall. And isn't that what money is supposed to bring us, at least ostensibly? And Meir is also the gentleman across the screen from me. He was kind enough to join me for today's chat. So Meir, welcome.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you, James.
Great to have you. And I think the audience will appreciate what you have to say as well. We were just talking before recording about how packed full of nuggets of information this book is. And so if you're like me, you like information dense material, this is a field day. It's a buffet. But let me just back up. For some audience members who are new, maybe they're newer investors, they're just learning about this stuff. How would you introduce behavioral finance?
Well, it is important to see that behavioral finance itself, yes, it probably dates back the modern version to the early 1980s, but it has expanded and it has grown and it has become richer over time. And so what we did in the first generation of behavioral finance, which was in the 80s, was to overturn the notion that people are rational. And we said, here are all kinds of things they do that is kind of funny. For example, people are reluctant to realize losses, even though doing so is going to save them money and is going to increase their wealth. And so we called people irrational. But of course, this is crazy. People are not stupid. People are not irrational. People have reasons, sometimes good, sometimes not. And sometimes, of course, we do make mistakes. So, for example, the reluctance to realize losses comes because we are sensitive not just to risk, but also to regret. And when you realize a loss, when it becomes a real loss rather than a paper loss, people feel that now it is that they kiss the money goodbye. And so you have to understand that. And so in the second generation of behavioral finance that I developed and presented in a book, Finance for Normal People, I said, look, here is what we know from marketing. People care about utilitarian benefits like wealth, but they also care about expressive and emotional benefits. And socially responsible investing is a perfect example of that. That is, people care about getting good returns from their investments, but they also want to stay true to their values. They also want those expressive and emotional benefits. And now I have been expanding the domain of behavioral finance further into well-being, because eventually, what is it that people want? What is the wealth for? It is about life well-being. And so you cannot really talk about financial well-being and leave it alone. You really have to speak about life well-being. And life well-being, of course, includes family and includes friends and includes work and health and religion and society and all kinds of categories in between. And so I see behavioral finance as an expanding circle, really talking about people. Money, of course, is central to it, but it is not all there is to it.
Do you think, Marin, this question just popped into my head because I've done business with China for many years now. There's a huge generational difference in how people there see wealth. The original generation, the older generation, let's say the first generation that got wealthy, they call them Fu Yi Dai. They're in their mid to late 50s now, let's say mostly. Their parents didn't have a chance to get wealthy. They're very like money centric, very aggressive. Their kids are more ideological, more idealistic, and different. And I think the same is true in Western societies. Maybe that was 100 years ago. At the beginning, you had kids working in the coal mines and everybody was just trying to get money. And now we're kind of relaxing more. Do you think as societies mature, as societies get wealthier, the role of behavioral finance, of those expressive and emotional non-monetary benefits of money, do you think that's going to increase?
Yes, I think that once you have a fair amount of money, then some people, for them, getting even more is really what matters. So they have 1 billion, but their friend has two. So they are striving for $2 billion. And the rest of us say, what are you doing? This is crazy. So it is really important to understand that money, in addition to its usefulness for spending, is also a status symbol. It's also having expressive and emotional benefits. And so in China, when you have a society that used to be flat, all of people were equally poor, and suddenly there are some people who are rich. Well, it's not enough to be rich. You have to show other people that you are rich. And so you buy a fancy car and a fancy handbag and so on. I think that their kids grow up with a sense of, hey, yes, we have money and our parents are going to share theirs with us. And now what we want is life. We want something that is more than that. And so I've met many very wealthy people who want their kids to earn as much money as they do. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. That is the beauty of having parents who are rich, is that their kids can really follow their passion, not to become lazy, not to become party people, but really to be able to become artists, say, even though they're not going to earn much money. I think that some parents, wealthy parents, find that really distressing. And I say, my parents helped me with their limited means. They're Holocaust survivors. I have a whole lot more. I can help my kids more. And it really is giving me high well-being in addition to giving them high well-being.
So well put. I think one of the things you mentioned in the book as well, wealth without respect actually does not increase well-being. That was interesting to me. Is people think they want wealth, but really what they want is the accoutrements or the things that they imagine come with wealth, and probably many of those things do come. Probably some of them don't come. So it's quite interesting. And let me go back to a quote that I think a lot of people are talking about in their interviews with you at the beginning of the book, because I think it sums it up so well, which is you say, if you really want risk, get married. If you want risk, get married. If you really want risk, have children, or something to that effect. And it's so true, because, compared to that sort of risk dwarfs how your portfolio may respond to the long end of the yield curve, or, whatever technical financial definition you want, right? But people focus on the money because it's quantifiable. But in reality, it's just one part of the totality of life. And economics is a social science after all, right?
Well, precisely. That is, finance tends to be really very narrow. It is really funny because economics is broad. That is, in economics, you have the economics of religion, and the economics of marriage, and the economics of children. But finance, it is all about risk and maximizing wealth and so on. And then we say, well, the rest of it belongs to marketing. That's not our business. But it is really strange because the real risk, as you quoted me, in life, are not really in the stock market. Yes, we do need money, but think about marriage, think about children, think about moving to another country, as I did, because I had a boring job in Israel, and I said, I didn't think about risk and return and all of that. I just said there must be more to life than having a boring job and a pension after you retire. And so I took what is, objectively speaking, a substantial risk. I left a sure job. I was already married. In fact, we were waiting for our first baby. I didn't know that I'll complete the PhD. I didn't know what will come next. I just knew that there is more to life than being able to live month by month or even accumulate substantial savings. And that, I think, is something that people in finance have to kind of get to think about, because that really is what matters. That is, when, if you are a financial advisor, you better focus on your client's life beyond, as you say, the yield curve and what the Fed is going to do next.
And just running with that thought, I suppose you could argue that a lot of the same cognitive biases that hurt us in the financial world, because frankly everything in life compounds, right, might hurt us equally in other areas, like career choices. I've known people, and I've been one of these people too, who focuses sometimes too much on the short term, and then I regret it later on. I know people worse than me. Maybe financially they get into a lot of debt, or they make short-term career decisions and think, oh my gosh, can't this person just kind of be disciplined for a while? At the same time, you have people who do the opposite. They live this whole life of discipline, and then they get into their older age and they can't spend the money because it's just not in their being to do that. It's just painful. It would literally cause them too much stress. And so when they finally have the money, they don't have the health, they don't have the time, and they're sort of stuck, right? So what's your advice, or what's your thinking on how people can sort of find this happy medium between not being too short term, which is obviously a huge problem if you look at some of the, at least the financial situations, you look at marriage statistics, things like that, and health statistics, but also not being so long term focused either that they miss life, they don't smell the flowers.
So I quote my mother, and I follow her advice. She said, spend money, but don't waste it. And so, people have this fetish of the compounding. Think about this latte that you are buying today. Those $5 are going to be 5,000 if you invest them, blah, blah, when you are 70. Well, at 70, you may not want lattes. You may be gone anyway. So it is just crazy. You have to have some balance. So I save money, and I know the rules of compounding, but I don't save because I know the rules of compounding. I save because I know that there is a present and there is a future. So I have responsibility to myself in later years. I have a responsibility to my family. I have a responsibility to my community. And so how to strike this balance between present and future is not something that has a formula. Close as it gets to a formula is my mother's advice. But you can see that is sure. In fact, I saw a bunch of articles that say, how is it that people who are billionaires now, their generations that follow are not billionaires? because they could compound the money. How do you do that? Well, have fewer kids, maybe don't marry. And I say, you know, money is to serve us. We are not to serve the money. And so, yes, there are too many people, old people, whose real problem is that they are so good at saving, they are so good of postponed gratification that they are going to be the richest men in the cemetery, as we say. And that is really sad. Now, breaking the habits of postponing and saving is not easy. You know, it took me some kind of thinking to kind of catch myself and say, "Hey, Meir, you're sufficiently old and sufficiently well off to buy business class tickets on long flights, and you know, don't wait to be upgraded, or maybe you're not going to be upgraded. Pay this outrageous money." A friend of mine says, if you fly economy, your son-in-law will fly first class. So you better enjoy it yourself, and of course, help your kids, help people who have much less than you. And in fact, that's what we did. You know, when we decided that we are now going to be flying business class on long flights, we will also increase our contributions to charity, so that it is kind of a well balance between us and the people around us.
Hey, it's very nice of you, and I think the media may have forgotten, but I recall years ago, I think you and your wife very generously gave $3 million to Santa Clara University as well, if I recall, which is
That is true. Yeah, I'm really, you know, I call myself an accidental wealthy man. You know, I saved, yeah, and compounding, of course, worked, whether I understood it or not. And so I have accumulated more money than I reasonably need. And you know, I did not shortchange my children, and my children are quite responsible and grateful for what they have, and quite aware that they are lucky relative to many people. But I also care about our university, and I also care about people who have, say, who are living with mental illness, and so we contribute to help other people as well. And the beauty of being rich is that you don't have to think about money. You know, so you spend more on you know, getting the house fixed, getting the garden working, inviting people over. We just had on Sunday, we had a ton of people from the department and elsewhere for a very nice meal and socializing. Yes, it cost us several $1,000s, but you know, it really is, if I think about it, it is really no big deal relative to what we have.
you're spreading the love, and because you're a finance professor, Mary, I have to ask this question because I get all kinds of interesting answers to this when I ask finance people, very theoretically extreme answers. How do you invest personally?
So I invest exclusively in index funds, and not just index fund, really well balanced and broad index funds. So I have a total stock market fund that is in US stocks, and I have a total international, and I combine them in some proportion. And I have some bonds, you know, that would serve me as kind of downside protection if something bad happens. And that is it. You know, that is indeed my chapter about investing. Might well be the shortest in the book,
10
because
pages, if I recall. Yeah.
because it is really not much. That is, if you just do that, invest in index fund, diversifying, pay no attention to what the market is doing today or tomorrow. It's not that I don't look at it. I mean, I know what the market is, and I can see my kind of money market fund that I use as a checking account is part of it, and so every day I know what my balance is, but and it goes up and down by many thousands. And what do? I shrug, you know. Uh, it really is not something that I tie my ego to. Uh, yes, I my ego, of course, is tied to the total I have, but the total plus uh, hundreds, uh, even hundreds of thousands or less, doesn't really matter.
What's interesting to me about your answer, and it is almost extreme in a way, because for someone who's such an expert on finance, you have the very simple, 3, 4, 5 low cost broad market index funds. What's interesting is the lack of tribalism. Some people, some stocks and some investing styles these days seem to have gotten very, very tribal. Apple stock, Tesla stock. I used to write articles for the Motley Fool years ago, and you could pick a tribal stock article, whether it's positive or negative, and for sure you'd get a lot of views because these stocks were just very tribal. Ditto for the chart type people, the technical analysts. That's highly tribal. It seems like you have blissfully separated yourself from all those motivations.
Well, think about it. That is, do I have Nvidia in my portfolio? Sure. Do I have Apple? Sure. And Amazon? That too. And in fact, if they have an extra weight in the portfolio, it is an extra weight in my portfolio. And so I get all of those benefits. But trying to pick a handful of stocks, then you're going to pick, of course, the Magnificent Seven 1 year, and you're going to be a champion. But the next year, it is going to be the year of the utilities. And you don't have that, and so you end up at the bottom. Why should I do that? That is, I'm asking myself, what is investment to me? I don't invest because it's a game. I don't want to spend time on it figuring out where Apple is going to go next. I just want to have my wealth grow so that it can serve my life. Now, I surely understand young people who are not my age and are thinking, I cannot wait until I am in my 60s or 70s. I am now, and I want to get married, and I want to have to extinguish my student loans. So maybe I'll get into Bitcoin. Well, you can take these risks, but the better risks really are risks in the form of education and enterprise. That is the risk that I took leaving a job in Israel to come for a PhD program. That risk, in fact, paid off really, really handsomely, much better than any Bitcoin would have served me. And on top of being accidentally wealthy, I also have a vocation, that is, I'm way past normal retirement age and I'm still working, and I have no plans for retirement. And so take risk where it matters. Get married. Yes, it is useful to get married. I was 22 when I was married. My bride was 21. We have been married for more than 50 years. One wedding, one wife. Wonderful. We have 2 kids, kids come from you, but they're not you. And so, it is kind of, it is work. And some people, of course, choose not to have kids, and I don't blame them because kids are really, really risky. And so, but you just have to kind of have a balance of all of these.
And it sounds like you have that balance. You're making wonderful contributions both to family, to community, to the investing community writ large through your work. So thank you for that. Let me double click on young people, because young people these days have a tougher time, arguably. In an inflation adjusted sense, it's much harder for a young person to buy a house, certainly in certain hot economies, certain parts of California, than it was in prior generations. College education for young people has gone way up, especially the Ivy League elite brand. I mean, the inflation rate of tuition is just obscene, especially when you look at the endowments some of these schools have, right? At least this is my own personal view. Yours may be different, but let me ask about spending for young people, because if young people probably see the stock financial advice, they watch some of these advisors say, cut your spending. And it's true. I mean, I give the example when I give speeches that if you give a baby $500, if that compounds at the long-term average historical rate of the S&P, it'll be worth almost $500,000 by the time that baby is 70 years old, right? But, they have pressure. They want to find mates. They want to look good. I was looking to study a door-to-door salesman, or maybe they were people collecting donations who wore like Ralph Lauren logo shirts, collected more money or made more sales than those who just wore plain collared shirts. And I know from China business days, a guy who borrowed money to buy a Ferrari so he would look rich to his prospective clients. This was in the kind of the late 1990s, the early boom days. He became very successful with that ploy. Now, that was probably a risky ploy, but I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're a young person, how do you decide, okay, these kinds of expenses are waste of money. They're going to get me into debt. They're not good. Versus maybe I should buy better clothes, or I should have a better car because it increases my chances of finding a nice mate. Don't they have that trade-off?
Again, there's no formula for that. But think about it this way. Diapers for a baby for 1 year will cost about $500. If you save it and invest it, you're going to have so much more when you're 65. But I hope you're not going to have a baby at 65. So there is a time for everything. Yes, you need money to buy an engagement ring. You cannot buy her an engagement ring when you celebrate 65. And so what you need to do is just be mindful. Again, spend money, but don't waste it. There are some times, I've written about a man who says, I'm a journalist, I'm making good money, but my friends are bankers and they think nothing of paying $300 for dinner and $200 extra for a fancy wine. What do? I do not want to lose them. Well, what do? You have a conversation with them and say, I can join you in other events, but not in those fancy restaurants. And if they say something that makes you feel that unless you copy them, they will not be your friends, well, look for other friends. It just is that simple or that difficult to actually implement. But that is the thing. And we don't know what the future is going to bring. Looking back, I could have been much freer with money in my early years and accumulated less. But that would have been something I did not know, of course, at that time. So I did make a choice that is reasonable, and I don't really regret what I have done in the past. And remember, there are families, okay? Families are insurance companies. My parents were far from wealthy, but my parents and Nava's, my wife's parents, helped us with a down payment on an apartment in Israel. Did I help my kids with that? Of course I did. And so this notion that some people have that I had it hard, so my children better have it hard too. Let them get it on their own. It is just stupid. My parents were refugees escaping from Poland into Siberia. They married in Uzbekistan. I was born in a refugee camp in 1947. Do I have to get my kids through that? That is, my parents tried to make my life easier, and I make my children's life easier as they could afford and as I can afford.
That makes sense. I mean, there's no sense in humanity reinventing the wheel. When I hear these parents who won't help their kids with college even though they can, or they won't co-sign a college education loan, things like that, just for the sort of, almost not really to spite them, but for the sake of making them learn that hard lesson. I agree with you. It's counterproductive.
Yeah, it is. I because I grew up in Israel, I know another culture in addition to the American one, and in Israel, parents help their kids when their kids actually need it, when they are in their 20s, or 30s, to buy a house. Uh, Somehow, there are Americans who think that if you give young kids money, they're going to become spoiled brats. Um, well, to get them not to be spoiled brat, help them find a vocation, help them find a profession, help them find something that is meaningful in life. Making them poor is not going to push them to become people who are happy with life and productive. Uh, that is, that just doesn't work. So I don't really understand what people are saying, and why it is that they are afraid to give the kids money with a warm hand rather than have the kids wait until they die and then collect that money.
And let me piggyback on all this, Mayor. Just stepping back, for most of human history, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years, whatever you want to consider human, we have lived together in extended families. And I think in the developing world, that's still mostly the norm. In the Western world, really starting with, Henry Ford, the assembly line, things like that, we got this notion of nuclear family, mother, father, and kids. And that's wonderful for job mobility. You can go wherever the best fit is, the highest paying job is, and there's a certain societal benefit to that. However, it thrusts all the costs of elder care and child care generally onto that one family versus the group. The African proverb, it takes a kid to raise a child. It's kind of true financially and child. I mean, I know this as well. I was struggling with my son when he was young. It's a lot of work, right? Has the nuclear family been a well-being success in your mind?
Well, well, think about the nuclear family. So if you try to live together with grandparents and young kids, it does not necessarily work very well. That is, in fact, I know that, or at least my parents knew that from their experience, because my grandfather on my mother's side, he was older than my father, of course, and so he thought that he deserves more say in how the family is managed. He was more orthodox than my parents. Uh, well, you can see how it creates conflicts. You can see how when money is tight, and that grandfather thinks that the best use of his time is to go to the synagogue uh, rather than find a job, that creates tension. So those extended families living together uh, has advantages. You get built-in babysitting, but it has many disadvantages. What is really nice is to have the best of both worlds. In other words, you live with your kids in your house, husband and wife, and then grandparents live hopefully nearby, and you get to visit them, and they visit you, but you live separately. And remember, Americans are not those individualistic as we describe them. Uh, you know, think about the notion of the sandwich generation. Americans do not abandon their elders. They sacrifice a lot to take care of their elders and their children, and so that circle of family is really broader. And if you have a poor brother and you have plenty, uh, I think that Americans share the wealth, help, maybe pay for their kids' college education in addition to their own, or find some other way to help that it does not make the ones that have less money feel awkward. Uh, so I think that it is nice to have those options of living close to grandparents but not with them.
There's a happy medium. And yeah, I think on surveys, Americans are some of the most charitable people in the world in terms of donating money to various charities relative to other nationalities.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Speaking of surveys, Mayor, younger generations of Americans pretty consistently and strongly feel it's important that they invest in, and often they have their career aligned in ways that are aligned with their values. And this takes the form of the socially responsible investing, ESG, impact investing, whatever we want to call it. I'll put it all in the same bucket. That's had its run in terms of lots of new ESG funds cropped up a couple of years ago. And then it had a backlash. Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly I think the EU Commission on Sustainable Finance, and I think Citigroup and some others suddenly changed their stance on guns. Right, guns are bad, but if they're used to defend us, then guns are good. So there was a lot of hypocrisy and realization that hey, we're buying oil too, and we can't really avoid this, and the economic web is very complicated. How do you think that's going to play out? Is there a long-term future in the sense of well-being through investing in ways that I would believe in? Do you think it works?
Well, let me begin by saying that I do not invest in socially responsible way. I invest in those broad indexes that have some of the ugliest companies in the world. Then I use my money to donate to support whatever causes matter to me. And so, but I have this standard analogy. I say, imagine that you are facing an Orthodox Jew, and you say, listen, pork tastes pretty good. It costs less than kosher beef. Why don't you buy and eat pork and donate the savings to your synagogue? Well, everybody understands that this is absurd. And so I say, look, if having fossil fuel companies in your portfolio feels to you like pork in the mouth of an Orthodox Jew, by all means, exclude them from your portfolio. But if you think that you are doing good for anyone by excluding tobacco stocks or fossil fuel or weapon stocks from your portfolio, you're simply wrong. There is some benefit in knowing a bit of finance. That is, if you sell your fossil fuel stocks, other people buy it. And if enough people sell, then the cost of capital of companies, of fossil fuel companies, is going to grow up, and maybe they'll invest less in extraction of fossil fuel. But they are swimming in money. They don't need money anyway. And so you don't do any good. And so if you want to hold that banner and say, I am true to myself, fine. If you want to wave it, showing it to other people, that's fine too. But if you think that you're pulling plows, if you think that you're doing good for others, you don't. And for that, you need to know just a bit about finance, about the fact that when you sell your shares of fossil fuel companies, you're not taking money away from those fossil fuel companies. You are just giving it to somebody who couldn't care less about your values. In fact, he might well be enjoying higher returns this way and laughing all the way to the bank.
He probably is, actually, yeah. Or maybe it's a nation that the U.S. doesn't like, and they're enjoying a cheaper cost of oil, something like that. Same principle. I think it's
Yeah.
well put, Mayor. Last question, we start to wrap up here. Scott Galloway has pointed out that American men are falling behind. If you look at college graduation rates, women are just massively outdoing men. And it's not that they've caught up and are now doing better. It's that the men are dropping through the cracks. And that's a problem. Men, when they get into the prison system, it's quite expensive to house a prisoner. They're not out there contributing to society. They're less desirable mates for women. This seems to be an issue. Do you have a view on all of this?
Well, yes, yes, the United States is overly punitive in its sentencing. And so we have too many people in prison. That crime is worth a year in prison, not 7. Okay, so that is one thing. But more important, when it comes to marriage, there are many things that come in. It might well be that a woman with a college education marries a man who does not. And they might well live happily after. And it might well be that woman turns into a homemaker and takes care of the kids, and the man is working outside the home. When you have, say, well, there's a story about two students at Princeton. She said, look, we had equal skills, equal talents. We thought that neither of us would have to work killer jobs, working day and night. Well, it turns out that both of them were doing that. And she said, we have to figure out something. And she said, my husband would not quit his job, so she quit her job. And so you can see that there are still norms that have to do with who is working outside and who is working inside the home. There are still norms about who earns more money, the husband or wife, and what it does to the marriage and so on. So I would not worry about those raw numbers of people who go to college. College is a wonderful thing. It really makes you a better person, a more interested and a more interesting person. But it does not mean that there is anything that is wrong in a woman with a college education marrying a good man who lacks it.
Well put. I remember that story from the book. And certainly if somebody wants to buy your book, I'm guessing they could just go to Amazon. You would send them there. What if someone just wants to follow you separately as well? Your thoughts, anything you might publish in the future, where would you send that person to?
Well, why don't you contact me on LinkedIn? I assure you, I will accept your invitation. You will get the stuff that I'm doing, whether it is my writings or interviews and so on. I think that is probably the best if you want to follow my own work. If you want to follow more generally work in behavioral finance, there is a site called ssrn.com. Registration is free and you can choose the journals, and there is one on behavioral and experimental finance. You can subscribe to that and you'll get abstracts of and access to papers as they are being written. That is useful as well.
LinkedIn is becoming the preferred platform. The last professor I interviewed, Larry Cunningham, who's a corporate governance expert, said the same thing. Just post my LinkedIn. So I'll happily post that. I should say in the show notes, I'll also post a link to your book. If someone is hearing our chat and would like to take a look at your book, they can buy that too. I'll post a link to that as well. Meir Statman, you have been very generous with your time. Certainly appreciated talking to you. And I believe those watching in the audience did as well. So thank you for that. And thanks to you guys, as always, for watching us at home.